The House is scheduled to hold a final vote on President Biden's $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief bill on Wednesday. The measure is expected to pass. It will then head to the president's desk for signature. The plan includes relief for millions of Americans who are awaiting assistance and extends federal unemployment benefits, which were set to expire in less than a week. CBS News congressional correspondent Chris Van Cleve has the latest.
Sarah Mealy is among the roughly 40% of Americans who say they're still feeling the financial impact of the coronavirus. Not able to work for months, Mealy was only able to make about $20,000 cleaning homes in Texas last year. She spent her savings trying to weather the pandemic.
But things are tight right now.
Mealy, a single mother, and her 9-year-old are poised to get $1,400 stimulus checks and see their child tax credit grow by about $1,000.
It'll definitely help me at least for the next 2 to 4 months, for sure, in a very big way.
Tonight, the 600-plus page COVID relief bill is back in the House, and it is expected to pass tomorrow morning.
I'm so excited, I just can't hide it.
Likely without any Republican support.
We are going to be saddled with a burden, spending burden, and a tax burden that is really indefensible.
Democrats say the child tax credit, up to $3,600 per child, will help lift nearly 10 million children above or closer to the poverty line. For Sarah Mealy, it could be a bit of breathing room, but the credit disappears from the tax code after this year.
Getting something out of the code is oftentimes harder than getting something in the code. What we did is unlikely to go away.
And the need to renew that tax credit will be facing Congress just as it enters an election year next year. As for those stimulus checks, the White House says they will go out by the end of the month, and unlike the Trump administration, they will not bear the president's name. Elaine?
Chris Van Cleve, thank you. For more, I want to bring in Jennifer Haberkorn. She's a congressional reporter for the LA Times. Hi there, Jennifer. So if the bill is passed by the House and signed by the president, I mean, we heard Chris say by the end of the month, how long will it take for Americans to actually start receiving that relief?
It's going to be pretty quick. You'll remember the IRS has done this a couple times already. Checks have gone out in the last year. So they know how to do this. They know who should be receiving these checks. So it's going to be just a matter of a couple weeks before these payments are sent to consumers, whether it's through the mail or through direct deposit, which would be even faster.
Well, the White House no Republicans are expected to vote for the bill, and Democrats only have a narrow majority in the House. Some progressive lawmakers have expressed concerns about the bill. Jennifer, what are they saying, and how are they expected to vote?
Yeah, progressives are frustrated that the bill that passed the House had a $15 minimum wage requirement. The Senate stripped that out, both because it wasn't going to be allowed through the Senate's arcane rules, and they didn't have the votes for it, frankly, among Democrats in the Senate. So progressives are frustrated that that's gone. They really wanted to see that in there. They wanted to see the White House and Senate Democrats take a stand to try to keep that in. But now that it's out, they've grumbled a bit. But it does sound like they are going to vote for the measure. As you mentioned, Democrats have a very small margin in both the House and Senate. So House Speaker Nancy Pelosi can only afford to lose about 4 Democrats. And there were 2 moderates who already voted against the measure. So there wasn't really any wiggle room for progressives to vote against the bill unless they wanted the entire effort to fall apart.
Well, we know that the White House is eyeing infrastructure improvements as its next major agenda item once the COVID relief bill is signed. Jennifer, what are congressional Democrats looking to focus on specifically?
Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting because coming out of this bill, they're already eyeing what they want to do next, and they want to be ambitious in an infrastructure package, but no one has really gotten to specifics yet as to what exactly that'll mean. So for right now, we're talking everything from bridges, tangible infrastructure to broadband, which is something that might actually have a lot of bipartisan support to expand broadband access throughout the country. And, for all the consternation we saw over this bill between Republicans and Democrats, infrastructure is commonly viewed as something that can, in theory at least, be bipartisan. And I think the question is going to be whether, Republicans and Democrats can actually come together once they start talking about details as to what would be in an infrastructure plan.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, is that given what happened with COVID relief and lack of Republican support for that, I mean, how realistic is it to think about a bipartisan infrastructure kind of package? You mentioned broadband. It's really interesting because, of course, we're in a period of time where the disparities in various communities have really been pushed to the forefront here when you have children dependent on that access and unable to connect literally to their teachers because of that. So potentially there could be some room on that front, on the broadband issue, it sounds like.
Yeah, you're exactly right. This pandemic has brought that to the fore. And I think we see Republicans and Democrats interested in improving access. And so that's going to be the challenge. You're coming out of this bill in which Democrats made pretty clear from the start that they weren't interested in working with Republicans. They kind of said, this is our bill. We'd love for it to be bipartisan. Come on board, Republicans. And the challenge with this is going to be, can you start at attempt at bipartisanship, an attempt at negotiation? And remember, too, Congress is a couple years out of practice for doing anything in a bipartisan manner. And, when they do have to do something bipartisan, such as to fund the government or increase the debt ceiling, it's a really significant struggle. So, President Biden came into office saying that he wanted to be bipartisan, remember, and he, really touted his years in the Senate working with Republicans. Republicans say he threw that away with the COVID bill. So now this is going to be an attempt to perhaps put those skills to the test and see if he can get a big bipartisan measure through.
We're going to continue to watch that. Meantime, Missouri Republican Senator Roy Blunt announced on Monday that he will not be running for re-election in 2022. He joins 4 other GOP senators who have previously announced their retirements. Jennifer, how are Republicans and Democrats viewing these retirements ahead of the 2022 midterms?
Senator Blunt's retirement announcement was relatively surprising. He's a member of the Senate leadership, and in Senate standards, at least, he's relatively young. And so it was surprising. And, there's the only way to look at this is that these Senate Republicans who've chosen to retire don't see an avenue to regain the majority in the near future, or they don't want to put up with what they would have to go through to get there. Obviously, we've seen former President Trump has indicated that he wants to play in congressional primaries in the 2022 midterm elections. Usually, the minority party is favored in the first midterm election in a new presidency. So Republicans had a lot going for them going into 22 in that regard. But it's going to be a difficult election between the Biden agenda up against former President Trump trying to weigh into the midterms. And clearly these Republicans have decided that that's not worth the fight.
All right. Relatively young, by the way, for people wondering, I believe Senator Blunt turned 71 in January, but you're right, Jennifer, it's a different standard.
We're talking about the Senate.
In D.C. That's exactly right. A much different standard than outside the Beltway. All right, Jennifer Haberkorn. Jennifer, always good to see you. Thank you so much.
Great to talk with you.